this moment, every preacher gets it right when he starts speaking, where he's like, I don't remember anything I wrote about this week. I don't remember anything that I was going to say. And that's why we always have some sort of joke up at the front, just so we feel comfortable and can get back in the mindset of what we're going to be talking about. So I don't have a joke, but I do have some true or false statements. We're going to play a little game here real quick, okay? And since Ian started with thumbs up or thumbs down, that's what we're going to do. If you think this is a true statement, you can give me a thumbs up. If you think it's a false statement, you can give me a thumbs down, okay? You ready for this? So first one, here it is. Here it is. Vitamin C prevents colds. Vitamin C prevents colds. True or false? The trick is you should look at the doctor when okay, if there's a doctor in the room. Yeah, okay, so hey, I know I hate to break this to you, but there has not been a single scientific study that's proven that vitamin C actually helps prevent or reduce the length of colds. I know it's a placebo effect. Good stuff, though. Sorry, now that I told you it's a placebo effect, it won't work anymore. So, second, there are more stars in space than grains of sand on every beach of the world. More stars in space, so is there more stars or more sand? More stars or more sand? Ooh, this is actually a true statement. There are more stars that they found in space than if you were going to add up all of the sand on the seashore. It's pretty amazing. Shows you the power of God. Chewing gum takes 7 years for a person to digest. I'm sure you heard this from your parents growing up, you know. Don't swallow your chewing gum because it takes 7 years to digest. But sorry, this is false. It digests in a lengthy amount of time, but typically it passes through just like everything else. Okay, next, cracking your knuckles too much will give you arthritis. Is that true or false? True or false? It's false. It's false. There might be some other sort of negative effect to cracking your knuckles, but it's not linked to arthritis. Shaving makes hair grow back faster. Shaving your face makes hair grow back faster, or your legs, either way. Shaving makes hair grow back faster. This is actually false as well. Listen, I believed this one for a while, and I would shave every day. Now I just shave every 3 days because there is no hope for this face, okay? I'm not going to grow any more hair than I already have on it. If a piece of paper was folded 45 times, okay? Now understand, you're crossing it. If it was folded 45 times, if that was possible, it would reach all the way to the moon. True or false? Whoa.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I know. This is a tough one. If you're folding a piece of paper and then you fold it over itself again and fold it over itself and fold it over itself, if that were possible, it would reach all the way to the moon.
No.
This is true. You ever seen that calendar thing where if you ask like for a penny one day and then you exponentially multiply it, so the next day you ask for 2, the next day you ask for 4, by the end of the month, you're actually a millionaire, okay? And you would think, okay, pennies, there's only 31 days, but that's how multiplication works. It's crazy. So yeah, piece of paper, if you were able to do it, fold it 45 times, it would reach all the way to the moon. Going out with wet hair increases your chance of catching a cold. This is another one you heard from your parents. Don, you don't even have to worry about this. Come on. Okay, this is false. Colds are not caught by wet hair. And then finally, last one, okay, parents. We're going to come to a disagreement about this one, I think. I don't know, we'll see. Sugar makes children hyper. Children make sugar hyper. You give your kids sugar, they're going to get hyper. Once again, no scientific studies that have proved this. In fact, the double-blind studies have shown that that's actually not true. Well, you know, there might be some other negative effects once again, but sugar does not increase hyperactivity. So I'm going to feed your kids a ton of candy, and we're going to find out if this is true. Deal? All right. So true or false? Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If we believe something, right, if we know it to be true, at least in our heads, then we act on it. Right? So if I believe vitamin C actually prevents colds or helps me reduce the length amount of time that I'm going to have a cold, then when I get a cold or feel like I have a cold coming on, what am I going to do? I'm going to be drinking that orange juice. I'm going to be popping vitamin C airborne pills, whatever it takes to reduce that cold. Because when we believe something, we act on it, right? Now, we've been doing this series called Check Your Pulse. And what we're talking about in this series is checking whether we are spiritually alive. And we're talking through the book of 1 John, which is in the New Testament. It was this little letter written by John, okay? Pretty straightforward. But this is John the Apostle, okay? John, the John that hung out with Jesus, one of his best buddies. And he wrote a couple of books on the Bible, and we're going to be talking about a couple of them today. He wrote the Gospel of John. He also wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, which are all short little books right in front of Revelation, which he also wrote, okay? So John wrote a lot of stuff. We're not going to touch on Revelation because that's got some wonky stuff in it, but we're going to spend time in 1 John. We're going to talk a little bit about the Gospel of John as well. So check your pulse. Now, throughout the book of John and 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, John wrote a number of allegories, pictures for whether we can check whether we are spiritually alive. And Jake has talked about some of them. One of the things he talked about was the light, right? Was that last week?
Yeah. Light and darkness.
Light and darkness, yeah. So light and darkness. Today we're going to talk about truth, right? Truth, because he also writes a lot about this whole idea of truth. So we're going to jump right into 1 John. Luke's going to have it up on the screen here for you to read. He starts off writing, 1 John, verse 1, it says, "My dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin." So why is he writing this?
So we won't sin.
So we won't sin. Okay, so here's the deal. I got to explain this real quick because sometimes we get a little confused about what is sin and isn't sin and how sin works. So I got a line here. Now this line is going to represent sin and not sin, okay? Things that are sinful and things that are not sinful. Now over here, this side, the Bible calls this holiness. It calls it righteousness. This is where God dwells, okay? This is where he spends his time because God can't have anything to do with sin. On the other side of this line, though, is what we call sin. And sin is anything that is not love, okay? Anything that doesn't belong to God. As John's going to explain in just a little bit, this is hatred towards your brother. Any act towards God or towards another person that goes against God's will. That is what sin is. Now, if you notice, in our world, we like to try to treat it like there's three sides to this line. We've got sin, and we've got God, and we've got something in the middle, right? But there isn't anything in the middle. There isn't anything in the middle. See, there's this side, which John describes as darkness, and there's this side, which John describes as light. And you're either in this camp or you're in this camp. It can't be both, okay? Now here's the reality. John writes and says, hey, I'm writing to you this so you will not sin. Now, the question is, have we sinned?
Yes.
Absolutely, okay? Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned," every single one of us. If you've ever lied, if you ever gossiped, if you ever killed anybody, if you've ever done any of those things, then you have sin on you. And it doesn't matter what kind of sin it is. It doesn't matter how much. Okay, gross illustration. I was talking to one of my friends recently, and we were talking about this, and he's like, well, wouldn't God be okay with just like a little bit of sin? And I said, here, listen, think about this. Say I gave you a cup of water, right? And then I vomited. And I put a single drop of vomit in that cup. Just a single drop, just a little drop. Would you want to drink the cup of water? No, God doesn't want the vomit water, okay? Any amount of sin means that we're in this camp over here. We cannot be on this side, right? And since we've all sinned, we've all been over here at some point at least, right? Every single one of us. Now, John keeps writing, and he says, but if anybody does sin, good news, guys, if anybody does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. So we have Jesus Christ, who's our advocate. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for ours, but for the sins of the whole world. Now, here's the deal. Atoning, advocate, these are lawyer terms, right? You know, law terms that he's using here. Atoning means that Christ is he's paying our dues. He's taking our punishment. He's coming and taking the punishment that we deserve. Because here's the deal. God says that this side, this is where we want to be. This side over here, though, I'm messing up the mic because I'm moving so much and it's driving Jimmy crazy. I'll try to stand still, I promise. But, okay, I don't promise that because that would be a sin because I'd be lying. Okay, so this side over here, anybody who is over here, according to God's standards, deserves death. I know that seems kind of harsh, right? But God is so good, God is so just, God is so righteous that he cannot stand sin in his creation. So anybody that has sin and lives over here deserves death. But Jesus became our atoning sacrifice, right? Atoning means he took the punishment that we deserve, that death that we deserve, and he came down here, lived on this earth, died in a horrible way on the cross to take our punishment on his shoulders. And as a result of Jesus, we can move from here to here. Does that make sense? That's the good news. That's the grace. That's the gospel that Jesus provides us, okay? And in fact, I could stop here today and I would have said the most important thing I'm going to say all day. All right? That is the most important thing that we as Christ followers can know, is that through Jesus Christ, we can have access to holiness, we can have access to righteousness, we can have access to living in the light, but that he is the only way. In fact, earlier in the Gospel of John, Jesus says these words. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Okay, so you can search all around in this world, and you can look for all different kinds of things that you think may help you get from here to here. But there is only one way, one truth, one life. I'm not going to do it. One life. And he is the only one that moves us from here, from this point to that point. Nothing else. Nothing else, okay? It doesn't matter how good of a life we live. It doesn't matter if we are super disciplined and read our Bibles every day. It doesn't matter if we practice our mantras in Buddhism. It does not matter. There is no other truth in this world that can get us from here to here except for Jesus Christ. That's it, all right? So here's the deal. First part of understanding living in the light is we have to know truth, right? We have to know what the truth is, and that's the truth. Jesus is the way. He is the only way to access through God, to God, and we only gain that access because he was the atoning sacrifice for us. And now, when we do mess up, which we will again, I promise you, he's the advocate, the one who's standing beside God's throne, speaking in our defense. Okay? That's who Jesus is. That is the truth. But John goes on. Verse 3 says this, we know that we have come to know him, okay? We know that we know the truth if we keep his commands. So, how do we know Jesus? We keep his commands, right? We do what he does. That's pretty simple, right? I'm going to put it this way. We know truth when we live truth, okay? We know the truth, and it's evident by us living truth, right? Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. So he answers this question, how much truth do we actually have to live? Like, how obedient do we have to be to Jesus Christ? And John says it's not 50%, it's not 90%. The goal is 100% obedient, okay? Now, once again, are we going to mess up? Absolutely, but we have an advocate, okay? We have an advocate who's standing in our defense. But the goal is to live like Jesus. And if we aren't striving to live like Jesus, but we're claiming to know Jesus, John says that we are a liar. A liar. We're not living true. We're not living the truth that we claim to know, right? Now, here's the deal. Well, actually, let me read this next one, and we'll go on with this. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them, and this is how we are. This is how we are. Okay, there we go. Reading sideways is difficult. Sorry. This is how we know we are in him. Keep going. Look. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Okay, so reinforcing this idea, knowing truth means living truth. Now, here's the deal. The word that he says, when he says no, the word here, the Greek word, no, is more than just head knowledge. Okay? It's more than just a belief. Okay? It's heart knowledge. Okay? It's actually the same exact word that's used in a relationship between a husband and a wife in the Bible. All right? So it's the oneness that comes from that sort of relationship. That's the kind of oneness the knowledge that we need of Jesus. Not just, hey, I know who that guy is. Hey, I know the words of the Bible. It's a oneness, intimate spiritual knowledge of Jesus Christ. That's what it means to know. So whoever claims to know him must live like him. Whoever knows truth must live truth, right? Now, here's the deal. We're not really good at this all the time, right? Like, we claim to know Jesus. We claim to be Christ followers. We're not always really good at it. And what we believe, what we truly know, what we know in our hearts, that's what always comes out. Recently, we moved recently. Our new house, we have scorpions. You ever seen a scorpion? They don't get huge here, okay? They're not real big, but they do pack a nasty sting, right? Now, my kids, they're learning about the different things that can hurt them around the house, you know, because we moved from living in the middle of Spring Hill and not having a whole lot of life around us to all of a sudden living in the woods, and there's a lot of things that can sting us and bite us and all different kinds of stuff like that. Now, my daughter, Emma, she's 4. She'd never seen a scorpion before, right? Never seen a scorpion. She found one on the back porch, and she went to my wife, and she said, I found a baby monster. She's not far off from the truth there, right? See, you know, knowledge is a scorpion, sure, but she believed. Now, what you do when you believe, you act on it, right? What you truly believe, you act on. This is the theme for the day, guys. If you believe something, you act on it. Your deepest belief. So she believes it's a monster. What are you supposed to do? You go get mom and dad because you don't want the monster to grow up and end up under your bed or in your closet, right? So mom came and took care of it. We're good, right? So the issue is, when it talks about living as Jesus did, there's a whole lot of Bible here, right? There's a whole lot of Bible. And earlier, a couple verses earlier, it said, we must keep his commands. What are Jesus' commands? Right? Because those are the questions we got to answer, right? So, lots of Bible. And I heard it over there. This is good. Okay, so here's the deal. We got the Old Testament, right? In the Old Testament, what happened was God came to the Israelites and he said, hey, if you obey me and keep my commands, I will make you a great nation. I will cause you to thrive, right? And so he came to the Israelites and he gave them 10 big commandments. And we know those, love, don't lie, don't murder, don't dishonor your parents, love the Lord your God with everything. These are the big 10. And then there are 613 other commandments that expand on those 10 commandments because God knew that they wouldn't really do a great job of keeping those 10 commandments, right? And over the course of thousands of years, the Israelites sometimes did an okay job of following those commands. They sometimes did a bad job. Now, when we get to the New Testament, there's this lawyer that comes up to Jesus and he says, hey, there's all these commands in the Old Testament. Which is the most important? And Jesus says, you could sum up all of the commands in this statement. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so John goes on and he says, dear friends, I'm not writing to you a new command, but an old one. Okay, this is the same theme that has been throughout all of Scripture, is if we could get this down, if we could get down this idea of loving God and loving others, if we could do this, we would actually be following the old law, right? So you've had these since the beginning. This old command is the message you've heard. But get this. He goes on in verse 8 and he says, yet I am writing to you a new command. I'm writing to you a new command. Its truth is seen in him, that's Jesus, and in you, because the darkness is passed away and the true light is already shining. So what's this new command? If we know the old command is to love God and love others, there's a new command in there? You didn't know this, did you? So Jesus, earlier in John chapter 13, verse 34, he says, a new command I give you. Same language, right? A new command I give you. Love one another. Nothing new there, right? This is the same command that we heard before, but he goes on to intensify a little bit. He says, as I have loved you, so you should love one another. So the old command is love your neighbor, love God, right? The new command is to love like Jesus, to love sacrificially, right? Remember, Jesus is that atoning sacrifice. He came down, lived, died for us. So we aren't called just to, hey, I really like you, you're a good person. We're called to sacrifice like Jesus, to give up ourselves for other people. That is the new command that John later on is telling us to obey. So if we know the truth, we're going to live the truth, and living the truth means that we're living in a loving, sacrificial way, right? That's where that leads to. That's the product of knowing Jesus. But the problem is, we aren't good at it, right? We aren't good at it. We aren't good at it. We can know stuff, we can know it in our head, but as humans, we are so good at deceiving ourselves, right? Self-deception is like, we're masters at it. I brought up the scorpions. Well, the house that we moved from had wolf spiders that would come in. Now, wolf spiders, if you've never seen one before, first of all, they're massive. They're monsters, okay? Second of all, they are like the smartest bugs you've ever seen. Like, okay, most other spiders, most other bugs, you can go towards them, and they're not, they're just going to ignore you. Wolf spiders kind of like look at you, and you can tell that they're planning on killing you. You can see it in their eyes, right? They're the worst. They're the worst. Now, here's the thing. I already told you, I know that scorpions, they can sting you, and it hurts. I've never been stung. My sister got stung when she was younger, and it hurt, okay? I know that wolf spiders, though, they rarely bite humans, and even if they do, they're non-poisonous, okay? So it's not going to do anything to you. But that being said, if I see a scorpion, I'm like, no problem, okay? I'll take care of this. I see a wolf spider, and it's a completely different issue, because I may know that stuff, but deep down in my heart, I know that wolf spiders are creatures from like the seventh circle of hell, right? And so the truth always comes out. What we believe always is lived, okay? The thing that we believe in our deepest hearts of hearts, not the truth that we have up here, it's the truth that we have down here, all right? Have you ever heard the phrase or the saying, there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole? There's no atheists in foxholes. And the reason is, the whole idea behind that saying is just, in crisis, in trouble, in hard times, the truth comes out. You can say one thing, but when the going gets rough, your deepest beliefs, they come out, right? Now, John goes on to write this. He says, anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness, right? We already talked about this. That is sin, okay? So light, darkness. Now, we already know what you need to have to live in the light. You need to know truth, and you need to live truth, right? Anyone who loves their brother and sister sacrificially, right, lives in the light, and there's nothing in them to make them stumble, okay? That's a great promise, okay? There's nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they're going because the darkness has today, guys. I hope you understand. Know truth, live truth. This is important stuff. Jesus Christ died for you. That's great stuff. A lot of us live blind. Even in the church, a lot of us live blind because we still hold on to things from our past life. We still hold on to hatred. We still hold on to unlove of our brothers and sisters. And as a result, what does it say? We walk around in the darkness and we're stumbling. We still live our lives blind a whole lot. Now, as we said, living in the light, know truth, live truth. I made a little graph because I'm a really systematic person. I like breaking things down and showing it on a chart. So here's the deal. I think there are basically 4 types of people in this world. There are 4 types of people in this room, okay? And you can see on this chart, at the top it says, does not know truth. On the bottom it says, knows truth. On one side it says, does not live the truth. On the other side it says, live truth. Now, each of those quadrants, okay, represents a type of person. So let's talk about the first one. Does not know truth, does not live truth. Okay, so here's the deal. In each of them, I'm going to give you kind of an action step. If you're this person, or if you know someone who is this person, an action step that they need to take in order to keep growing to be more like Christ. So here it is. Does not know the truth. The reality of this is in our culture, it might mean they've never heard of Jesus, but more likely it means they've heard of Jesus, but they don't really know Jesus, right? They've maybe heard of Jesus is good. They may even believe, hey, Jesus is a good guy. But they don't know him as a personal Lord and Savior. It hasn't actually hit their hearts that this is who Jesus is. And as a result, they don't live truth. Now, that doesn't mean they're bad people. Like, it doesn't mean that they're Satanists or anything. It just means that they're not living the truth, which living the truth is sacrificial love, right? They don't know Jesus, and so they aren't living the truth. No, they don't know truth, they aren't living the truth. That's how that works, right? They have been blinded by other truths in this world. I was just talking to a group of friends of mine this last Wednesday, and we were talking about other things in the world that we try to fill this void in our lives with, this God-sized hole in our hearts. You know. So if you look around in the world, people try fame, they try money, they try even some good things like comfort and family. These are all things that we try to use as the truth for our life. We say, if I have enough money, I can feel happy. If I, live this way enough, then I will find purpose. I will find contentment. I will find, And the truth is, they're wrong. They're stumbling around. You don't have to look far to know that. The people who you think would have it most together because they've achieved their dreams in this culture are the ones who are most addicted to drugs. You look at the upper crust, the rich and the famous, higher suicide rate, higher depression rate, higher alcoholic rate, everything is worse because they are following this truth, but that truth is only making them stumble, right? They are blinded to capital T truth by the false truths that are in their life, and they're stumbling around. So here's the deal. Someone who is in, this person here, they need to encounter the truth, right? Because they don't have any truth in their life. They don't have the sacrificial love of living truth. They don't have the knowing Jesus side of truth. They have no truth in their life. And a lot of times, unfortunately, for most of us, that takes hitting rock bottom before we realize that that thing that we were holding on to doesn't really save us. It doesn't really help us. It doesn't really bring us any closer to being the person that we want to be, unfortunately. Okay? But our role as Christ followers is to share the truth with those people, right? That's what we need to be doing. We take the story of Christ and we share it with them. We talk about who Christ is and what Christ has done for them and how they can have a right relationship with God as a result. That's what our job is. They need to encounter the truth. Now, here's the thing, guys, okay? In every conversation, in every relationship, there is God's part, our part, and their part. Okay? God's going to do his thing, all right? The Spirit of God, it says, works in people to bring about salvation in their lives. We have to do our thing, our part, which is to go out and share this story with others, but there's also their part. And sometimes people are going to hear the truth, and it's not going to move beyond head knowledge into heart knowledge. Okay? But that's what we're aiming for, encounter the truth. The second person is down at the bottom left. Right, the bottom right, okay.
You're right.
I was right on the left?
You're right on that.
Okay, we're good. So this is the person that knows the truth, okay? They've encountered Christ at some point, and they've understood who Christ is, and they maybe even entered into this relationship with him, but they don't live the truth. So they encountered Christ, they encountered the grace, the forgiveness that he gives to us, and then they use that as a license to go on and live how they want, thinking, okay, Christ forgives, and so I can continue doing this, right? And that sounds kind of ridiculous, except every single one of us have been here at some point or another, right? Where we are walking beside the line and we think to ourselves, this looks fun. This looks enjoyable. And I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I know that Jesus is going to forgive me, so, and then you move back over, But the problem is dabbling in the darkness just leads to living in the darkness. That's the reality. The more time you spend over here, the more you're blinded, the more you're going to start stumbling around in the darkness. And so Paul, a writer in the New Testament, he wrote some words in Romans 6 towards these people. He said, since we've received grace, should we keep on sinning? He's like, no, by no means. We died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Because when we choose Christ, when we come into a new life with him, it's not a life of sin. It's not a life of darkness. It's a new life meant to be lived in the light, living like him, right? So people who are here, if you're kind of wandering around in this quadrant, you need to choose to live truth. You need to choose to live like Jesus. You need to seek some accountability, seek some people who are going to hold you to Christ's standard and talk to them about it. You're going to have to put in the hard work of being a disciplined person for a while, because a lot of times it takes living the truth for a while. Actually, this was earlier in John. I didn't mention it, 1 John. But it says that when we live the truth, when we are obedient to Christ, that love for God is made complete in us. So sometimes when we, I hate to put it this way, when we fake it till we make it, right? You have to start putting in the hard work first. Eventually, love for God is made complete in you. But now let's jump to the opposite side of this coin, okay? Which is the people who don't know truth, but they live truth. Now, by don't know truth here, I mean people who have a head knowledge of Jesus Christ, and they may even know things really well. They might have read through the Bible. Actually, I had a professor in college who went to Israel at one point, and he met a Jewish guy who actually had memorized the entire Bible. It's pretty impressive, right? But he was an atheist. So you can head knowledge know the truth, right? Without heart knowledge knowing the truth. So that's what these people are. They're head knowledge without the heart knowledge. And they try to live the truth, though. They try to live in a really good way. They may even they may even desire to be earning the love of God, the love of Christ. And so they think, if I'm just a good enough person, if I follow the law enough on my own, then as a result, I can step across this line. But the reality is they never stepped into an intimate relationship with Christ, which is actually the true way across the line, right? It comes through submission to who Jesus is, not actions on our own. And the reason so many people end up here is because we're really tempted to save ourselves, okay? Especially in our culture. Especially in our culture. We hate relying on anybody else. We hate feeling like the victim. But the reality is there is no way for us to cross the line without Jesus Christ. It can't happen. It cannot happen. Now, we would commonly call this legalism. Now, I have a lot to say about legalism because I spent a good chunk of my life here, okay? Honestly, I grew up inside the church. And I spent a lot of time trying to be the right person, trying to earn God's love, right? And I really never waded into that relationship side of things because I thought I had it together, And to be honest, I did a pretty good job for a long time, I did a really good job, but it was more like walking the line where, I wasn't focused on the right thing over here, which was Jesus Christ. I was instead, I would live a really good life, and then behind closed doors, I would choose my way. And then I'd live a really good life, and behind closed doors, I would choose my way. I was big into the legalism thing. Now, Paul, the apostle, wrote this whole book called Galatians that is just confronting legalism. He spends the whole book of Galatians talking about how the law is an okay thing, but we're not meant to live the law without Christ. We can't live the law without Christ. 613 laws. You don't think you're going to mess up on some of those? You're giving Christ vomit water. Okay? That's what's happening. You can't do that. So I read a book recently. It's called Galatians for You. There's this guy, Tim Keller, he wrote it. He's a really smart guy. And one of the quotes that just stuck out to me I want to share with you. See, the gospel, that's the truth of Jesus Christ, means that we no longer obey the law out of fear of rejection and hope by salvation by performance. Okay, so we no longer obey the law in order to earn our salvation. But when we grasp salvation by promise, that is, when we understand who Christ is, when we truly come to know Christ, our hearts are filled with gratitude and desire to please and be like our Savior. And the way to do that, guess what? Is through obeying the law, obeying the command of Jesus Christ to love God and love others. And once we can't come to the law motivated by gratitude, and we are better in our obedience of the law than we ever were when we thought that our obedience might save us. Okay, so here's the deal. Truly coming to know who Jesus Christ is means that we can live truth better than we ever could by trying to do it on our own. Okay? So legalism it's not the way to go. Now, these two, just so you understand, the focus on the source of truth and choose to live truth, these two people right here, these are kind of half-truths, right? They've got half the truth right. They're living truth without knowing truth, or they're knowing truth without living truth. But in God's system, there are no half-truths. There's the gospel, and there's everything else. There's the good news of Jesus Christ, which is to live truth, or to know the truth and live the truth. And then there's everything else, and that's this final quadrant right here, which is knowing the truth and living the truth. Now, hopefully, that's where you find yourself. Okay? Hopefully that's where you find yourself, and if you don't, then you need to be focusing on the source of truth. You need to be choosing to live truth. You need to strive for obedience, and sometimes you need to just chill out a little bit and build that relationship with Christ instead. But if you happen to be living in this last quadrant, sharing the truth with others is what we're supposed to do next, right? Because here's the deal. We know, right, if we know truth, then we live truth. Living truth leads to sacrificial love. Jesus loved us so much that he came down to this earth and died for us. Why? So that we could have a personal relationship with him, right? So Jesus thought that sharing a relationship with us was the most important thing that he could do, that it was worth dying for. And if we know that, then we need to be sharing that relationship with others, and it's worth dying for. Okay? When we know the truth, we live the truth, which leads to us sharing the truth. That's how that works. So as I said, I don't like leaving you guys without some sort of next step as you walk out the room. So you need to figure out where you are. Take that next step. If you're up in that top right corner, spend some time getting to know Jesus. And anybody would love to sit down in this room with you and actually talk about who Jesus Christ is and what he can do in your life. If you happen to be the legalist, you need to focus on Jesus. Focus on the relationship. Stop trying to save yourself. Surrender. If you're the wishy-washy person down here on the bottom who's still living in sin, you need to stick to living discipline and actually try to live like Jesus. And then finally, the rest of us, we need to be going out there, knowing truth, living truth, right? That's what we need to do. So, final thought here and final challenge, okay? Because I think, honestly, knowing truth is where this really does all start, okay? Knowing who Jesus Christ is really is. And we practice communion every single week, right? And the goal of communion is to remember the truth, to remind ourselves of that truth that we know, and to reflect on whether we're living truth. So here's the big challenge for everybody today. I think if we spent more time doing communion on a daily basis, then maybe, just maybe, we'd do a better job of knowing truth and living truth. So I want to challenge you guys, in the next week, choose a time each day where you're going to reflect on Jesus, where you're going to reflect on the relationship that you know and the life that you're living. And ask yourself, am I living like Jesus? And am I living in relationship with Jesus? And I think if you can answer those questions with a yes, then you're going to be the person that God designed you to be. So, live truth, guys. We talked about checking your pulse. We talked about spiritual vitality and whether we're really alive. Checking your pulse means knowing truth and living truth. That's it. It's that simple. And yet it's that hard. So let's pray. Father, I thank you for your love, and I just ask that you give us the will to be like your Son. I ask that you help us to skip out on any other truth that this world has to present to us, and that we instead focus on the truth that Jesus is who he claims to be, that he has done what he has claimed to done, and as a result, we can have a right relationship with you and a right relationship with your Son, Father. I ask that we lean into that relationship, that we don't rely on ourselves, but instead that we know truth and that we live truth, and as a result, we share truth with others. It's through your grace that we can even talk to you and say amen. That's it. Bye.